You're listening to The Conversation. It's January the 26th, 1986, the night of Super Bowl XX, the biggest game in American football. The Chicago Bears, the clear favourites, are set to take on the New England Patriots. Thousands of people have flocked to Las Vegas to watch the game and gamble on its outcome. At this time, Las Vegas, in the state of Nevada, is pretty much the only place in the US that you can go to legally wager on a sporting event. And you have to do it in person, in one of the casinos that line the Strip. They offer odds on which team will win or lose. But on the night of Super Bowl XX, the sportsbook manager at one casino, Caesars Palace, decides to allow a new type of wager. He offers gamblers odds on whether a ginormous hulk of a player, nicknamed the Fridge, will score a touchdown. This has gone down in American sports history as the origin story for legal prop betting in the US, when people gamble not just on the result of a game, but on the outcome of individual events within it. Today, American sports are reeling from multiple gambling scandals that are threatening the integrity of some of the professional leagues. And many of these centre around prop betting. Players, coaches, and team staff have been accused of tampering with games, intentionally leaking information, or changing how they play in order to affect the outcome for gamblers. I'm Gemma Ware from The Conversation, a news and analysis platform partnering journalists with academics. Welcome to The Conversation Weekly, where experts explain how we ended up here. In this episode, how a single play 40 years ago kickstarted prop betting in the US, and how the sudden exponential growth of legal prop betting is changing the world of American sports. John Affleck, you're the Knight Chair in Sports Journalism and Society at Penn State University in the US, where you teach sports journalism. You've also been following the evolution of sports gambling in recent years very closely. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
So John, take me back. It's late January 1986, and the Chicago Bears and the New England Patriots are meeting in the Super Bowl XX at the Superdome in New Orleans. Where did you watch this game?
Well, I was a senior at the University of Notre Dame, which is located about 2-hour drive from Chicago and has a fair number of Chicagoans in its student body. So the night before the game, I was on Rush Street, which is a big sort of party district in Chicago. And the thing about the 85 Bears was they were one of the greatest all-time teams that has ever played in the NFL. They lost just one game in the regular season. And it wasn't that they won the other games. It was that they absolutely dominated the other teams, particularly with their defense, which was just throttling. Chicago had not had an NFL championship since 1963. And so the excitement was huge. And the team itself had sort of played up to it. They'd created a hip hop video, if you can believe it, called the Super Bowl Shuffle.
We are the Bears, shuffling through, shuffling on down, doing it for you. We're so bad, we know we're good, blowing your mind like we knew we would. You know we're just strutting for fun, strutting our stuff for everyone. We're not here to start no trouble, we're just here to do the Super Bowl Shuffle. Well, they call me Sweetness.
And they had sort of a bunch of characters on the team. Their quarterback, wore these headbands. His name was Jim McMahon. In the Super Bowl Shuffle, he has this line. He's like, "I'm the punky QB known as McMahon," and it was metered just like that. And Walter Payton, who was one of the greatest running backs of all time, was on that team. So there was almost a palpable feeling that the Bears were going to win, that this was a giant celebration. On the street the night before, there were people walking around carrying boom boxes, playing the Super Bowl Shuffle, and wearing gear that looked like they weren't just wearing Bears t-shirts. They were dressed up like specific players. And so, it was just a fun and ridiculous scene at the time.
And one of the players for the Bears was their number 72, William Perry, otherwise known as the Fridge. Tell me about him.
He was just humongous. So the thing about Fridge was he was a defensive tackle, actually. He was like the very center of the line. Unlike real football, which the rest of the world plays in American football, when you change from offense to defense, when you're attacking or defending, there is a complete substitution of the 11 players on the field. And so all the defenders come off the field and all the offensive players come on the field. Some clever assistant coach on the Bears thought, what we ought to do is when we're close to the goal line and we can score a touchdown, we ought to put the fridge in the backfield like a running back and have him just smash into people. And then our running back, Walter Payton, will be able to score quite easily. And so he became sort of a celebrity in his own right for actually playing on offense. And then they started to give him the ball every once in a while, so he'd score touchdowns, and that was just amazing. It's like the fat kid's dream in America to score a touchdown, and so he was living that dream. So everybody just glommed onto him, and he became a mini celebrity in this team of celebrities. He had his own little following.
And during this Super Bowl in 1986, Fridge became the center of a particular wager, a particular bet. Tell me what happened.
He is the beginning of what we call prop bets, or what are also known as micro bets now, which is a bet on something that happens within the game. It's not the result of the game, but it's something that's going to happen within the game. Just to set the scene in America at the time, really, Nevada was the only place in America where you could bet on sports outcomes other than horse racing. And so the casinos in Las Vegas had a problem because the game was expected to be quite lopsided. So how are they going to keep people interested in this game and betting on this game, particularly as the game goes on? So somebody thought, well, we'll put in a prop bet, and the prop bet will be, will the fridge score a touchdown in the game? And that idea that you'd put in this little prop bet and it would pull you in and maybe you'd make other bets was very popular. And then late in the third quarter of a game that wound up to be 46-10, the Bears had the ball close to the New England end zone at about the 2-yard line, and they sent the fridge in and they gave him the ball. And lo and behold, he scored a touchdown. So if you had the fridge scores a touchdown, your bet paid off. And it's basically the origin story for the plethora of prop bets and micro bets we have today. It isn't like the idea completely sprang fully formed from the head of the casinos in 1986. Sports betting in America kind of goes back to Virginia taverns in the 1730s and betting on fist fights and foot races and horse races and animal baiting and all sorts of pretty carnal activities. But it's sort of technology that, lights the brush fire.
Coming up, the legal changes in the US that allowed prop betting to flourish, and the scandals that followed. That's after this short break.
Hiya, I'm Katie Edwards, and I'm a health editor at The Conversation.
I'm Dan Baumgart. I'm a lecturer in health and life sciences at the University of Bristol, where I also work as a GP.
And we work together a lot, and we try to explain weird and wonderful things about the body. And now we're teaming up to host Strange Health, which is a new video podcast from The Conversation.
So each episode, we're going to be taking a health trend going viral on social media.
You know the kind of thing. Drink chlorophyll to make sure you don't stink.
Do you really need to detox in January?
Have a supplement to make your bum look better. All that kind of thing. Each week, it's going to be me and Dan, plus an expert, who are going to thrash out between the truths and the myths.
Me being an anatomist, I was like, can I have a look? And it was huge.
The liver is amazing. It's probably the only organ that can regenerate itself completely.
And we're calling it Strange Health because we're not scared of disgusting things. Episode 1 arrives on the 20th of January. So follow us on YouTube or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
So, John, it's been 40 years since the fridge scored that touchdown. How has prop betting exploded in US sports since then? And why? You can talk me through the reason why that's happened.
Sure. In Las Vegas, I mean, just for example, I mean, you wind up with all sorts of prop bets on the Super Bowl. Bets on who will score the most points in the first half, who will score the first touchdown, how long will the national anthem be? Will it be over 2 minutes or under 2 minutes, which basically comes down to whether the singer holds the final note.
Love that.
And the home of the brave. And how long they hold it is like the difference between 154 and 202. So
this is the late 80s, 90s, 2000s.
90s, early aughts.
And around this time in the early 2000s, the US started to see the emergence of a new type of online game through companies such as FanDuel and DraftKings. Now, today, these companies are big names in online gambling, but back then, they were doing something slightly different called daily fantasy betting. What was that?
A clever founder of FanDuel basically looked at the law that said only sports betting in Nevada, essentially, and said, well, there's a hole here. And the hole is that you're prohibited from betting on games of chance, but games of skill is a different story. And so the idea was to take fantasy sports and make them daily. Let me explain what fantasy sports are for those who don't know. At the beginning of the season, you and a bunch of your friends get together and you draft a team of all the players in some league, let's say baseball. And you pick your players based on their performance and what you think they're going to do. And then you bet that your team, if you add all their statistics up, the point total you've assigned for the various things they do, home runs, strikeouts, whatever, will beat your buddy. And then, you win. It's a friendly competition. There may be some money wagered. Very often there's like a party at the end. People give silly prizes, all that sort of thing. Daily fantasy is the idea that you take that and you do it for tonight's games and you wager money on it. And what's immediately created by people all over the country wagering is you have a fantastic number of people in this league that lasts one night, and you take the very top, and the very top get a payoff. So it's essentially like a sports bet, right? And so that was the predominant way people were gambling legally in that time. And it was like not very regulated. And they went from non-existent in about 2007 to ubiquitous in 2012. You couldn't turn on a sports show without the advertising being one of these companies. That actually, I think, increased the pressure to just have sports gambling, because if they were going to do this, then there needed to be some way to regulate.
So in 2018, there was a decision by the US Supreme Court that gave prop betting an even bigger foothold in the US. Tell us about that.
There was a federal law in place that was really designed to block online offshore books. And what it did was it only allowed sports gaming in the state of Nevada and 3 other states that had sports lotteries. And New Jersey took umbrage to this and sued, basically saying, look, under U.S. law, you can't have a federal law that applies to one state, but not the other states. It's a states' rights issue. One state gets a right, everybody gets a right. And the Supreme Court agreed with them, 6-3.
The Supreme Court will allow states to legalize sports betting. The court struck down a federal law that banned gambling on sports games in most of the country.
And what that did was it allowed states to make their own decision whether they wanted to allow sports gambling and how they wanted to allow sports gambling. And so the result of that is today we have sports gambling legal in 39 states and the District of Columbia. And most of those places you can get a bet online. So 2024, that's the last year we've got figures for. There were $150 billion wagered on sports legally in the United States.
And why would states want sports betting in their state?
Taxes. You can tax the revenue from the casinos, and that's the big attraction for states.
And how much easier has it got to do this kind of prop betting? I'm thinking about particular apps, technology that's essentially driven the ability to do it.
Oh, it's incredibly easy. I have one on my phone. I can make one right now on the Super Bowl. We could bet right now on how long the national anthem's going to last. The access is instantaneous.
And how central to US sports betting, and even to kind of gambling in the US as a whole, is prop betting now?
Now, just to give you an example, last semester, I was showing an NFL highlight in my sports writing class. And this is a class where I teach people how to cover sports and write about like a game or a feature story or whatever. And we were watching an NFL highlight because we're going to try to describe a play that happened. Quarterback threw a long pass, graceful catch by the wide receiver. And one of my students just ups and says, I lost $50 on that throw. And one of the other kids goes, I made $50 on that throw.
And this is just a random throw that you'd chosen from any game. So
completely random.
These are students, right? This is not people you'd expect to have a huge amount of money, and yet it's completely permeating their way of watching and enjoying sports. I mean, gambling can be quite a dangerous habit if you get addicted to it, can't it?
You're absolutely correct. I'm not saying my students are gambling addicts, but what I am saying is that it's really sticky. So the thing about prop betting and its increasing popularity is that you've got quite a number of public health studies that are showing things like suicide hotline use goes way up in the 2 years following the approval of sports betting. And so does bankruptcy, and predictable social ills increase, and they don't come down. And they're particularly strong among young men. About half of American men between 18 and 49 have a sports betting app on their phone. And the industry will say, yes, there's more sports betting, but there's also more warnings about the dangers of sports betting, which basically comes down to a commercial at the end of advertisements for apps, which is problem gambler, call 1-800-GAMBLER, and I'm not sure how much that really encourages people to handle their problem.
And you've argued that you believe the explosion of prop betting in the US is threatening the actual integrity of professional sports itself. Why do you think that?
We're in a moment where we're having a bunch of scandals in various ways in sports. And you have to go back to sort of as a spectator event. Why do we go to sports? And part of the reason is that we don't know the outcome of a sporting event. And that is why we're interested in it. We want to see what happens.
So these scandals, there was one in October involving basketball, the NBA.
The FBI sweeping in, making more than 30 arrests tonight. Authorities say all part of a massive NBA and mafia gambling scandal.
There was one in November involving Major League Baseball.
Tonight, a bombshell rocking the baseball world with an explosive new indictment unsealed today, charging 2 Cleveland Guardians pitchers in connection with an alleged bet-rigging scheme.
And then just a couple of weeks ago in early January, involving college basketball.
A college basketball betting scandal that spanned from 2022 to 2025. It involves 17 different schools.
Do they add up to something really quite worrying in terms of the direction of travel here, in people being...
Yes.
And we're talking about the players themselves being accused, indicted of misconduct here.
Yes, I think that that's very true. There are examples from other places in the world that aren't the USA that indicate this is happening everywhere. And so it's not really surprising that it's happening in the USA, but it is definitely a concern. And I think to kind of give you a broad answer to this, in 2018, when the Supreme Court opened the doors for what was going to happen next, different parties had choices. And at the time, for the conversation, I wrote about what is media going to do, because media had sort of acted like gambling is like dirty. We don't really want to talk about it. It's like talking about the drug trade or something like that. But now it was legal. So what are we going to do? And everyone had to make a choice. The same with leagues. And basically the choice has consistently been, we're all in. We're all in with this. The media, the number one network in sports broadcast coverage. ESPN has a daily betting show. And at one point, until very recently, they had a sports betting app. And the leagues themselves have gone through a transition. In 2014, the commissioner of the NBA was considered radical for putting an opinion piece in the New York Times advocating for the legalization of sports gambling. And now all the leagues have official sports books that they work with, and they're getting revenue from that. One of my basic tenets of sports business is that the parties involved will almost always act in their financial interest over social interest until social interests and financial interests come together and make it smart business. So eventually we may hit the point where the threat to the integrity of the game is so great that the leagues feel like they need to crack down. But right now it's, everybody get what you can at the trough.
And if you were put in charge of, the NBA, how would you handle it? What measures do you think need to be put in place to stay safeguard against it?
I actually don't think the leagues can do that much because of the law. I think it's I think it's a higher level decision on gambling in general, and they need to take a look at the level at which addiction is happening. I think if we're going to have legal sports betting, the warnings have to be a lot stronger. They have to be more like cigarette warnings in the States, and taxes need to be higher on gambling and that sort of thing. At the league level, really, I'm afraid that it gets down to, as much as I like to support player freedom of expression and that sort of thing, I think the penalties for being caught need to be pretty draconian, because if they aren't, there's always this temptation. It's a little bit hard to fathom sometimes why people would even participate in this when they're professional athletes, because the minimum salaries are pretty high. American players in the big sports, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, they're already incredibly wealthy by American standards. Why in the world would you jeopardize that? So I basically come down to, it's a legislative solution at the high level. At the league level, the penalties have to be really tough.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on to talk to us today about sports gambling. And we should make clear that we're not encouraging anyone to go and place any bets on the Super Bowl. And if you do gamble, please gamble with lots of awareness about the risks. Thank you, John. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
That's it for this week's episode of The Conversation Weekly. You can read more expert analysis on the upcoming Super Bowl and on the explosion of prop betting in American sports on theconversation.com, and we'll put some links to those stories in our show notes. We'll also put a link to a YouTube video of the Super Bowl shuffle from those Chicago Bears back in the 1980s. It's really fun. Go and have a look at it. This episode was written and produced by Katie Flood, with production assistance from Mand Marawani. Sound mixing is by Michelle Macklem, and our theme music is by Nita Saal. I'm Gemma Ware, the executive producer. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us directly at podcast@theconversation.com. You can sign up for The Conversation's free daily newsletter by clicking on the link in our show notes too. The Conversation is a non-profit news outlet dedicated to sharing the work of academic experts with a wider audience. If you like what we do, please consider supporting us at donate.theconversation.com. And please do also rate and review the podcast wherever you follow us. It really helps us reach new people. Thanks so much for listening.
I was saved by God to make America great again.
An autocrat loves a crisis. A crisis is the way that they mobilize their base.
While America is under invasion from within, we're under invasion from within.
He's testing the boundaries of what he can get away with.
We should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military.
We've asked 6 of the world's preeminent scholars how we can measure the make of an autocrat. It's a recipe of sorts, tried and tested by the most infamous leaders in history.
Hugo Chavez in Venezuela.
Vladimir Putin in Russia.
Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler.
Viktor Orban in Hungary.
He's basically bulletproof in terms of criminal prosecution.
Join us from December 29 as we explore Trump, the making of an autocrat, from The Conversation.